but we're so excited to have Wayne Levin here tonight. He's actually presented at our clubhouse, I think a few times, whenever we can get him to come. He just is a wonderful person and beautiful artist, and it's lovely to have him here. He had a new series come out, and we talked about sharing it online. So it happened. We worked around, he had a cataract surgery, so look at him, he's looking great, and he has no glasses anymore, so he's now 20/20 vision. So we're excited to have him on tonight. If those of you who don't know Wayne, I'm just gonna it's hard to do a quick introduction because he has been photographing for so many years and done so many amazing things that I'm not going to mention them all, or I'd be talking more than Wayne, but I do want to give a background just so you know what an impressive person Wayne is, because he's so humble and sweet that you would have no idea if you just met him that he's done all these things. So Wayne, he grew up in Los Angeles, California, sailing and fishing with his family. They raced sailboats, so he did have an interest in water, or introduction to water, early on. His dad gave him his first camera when he was 12 years old. Then his parents moved to Hawaii in 1967, and Wayne at that time was in the Navy, where he got really excited about traveling and exploring the world. He then followed his family to Hawaii in '68, where he fell in love with the ocean even more through surfing and body surfing at Makapu'u. Later, he moved to Kona. His family moved to the Big Island, and he got really excited about snorkeling and free diving, and eventually even scuba diving on some assignments for magazines. He's also sailed through the Pacific to Australia. He spent 1.5 years traveling around the world, and he's recently moved to Oahu from Kona. So we're really lucky to have him on this island with us. Most of you, if you know his work, he's renowned as a black and white photographer. He learned his darkroom skills from assisting a local photographer, Robert Wenkem, and he's known for his incredible underwater images of marine life and surfers. I kind of think he's like a documentary ocean photographer, is the way I think of it. Through his ocean experiences and his images, he continues to be a strong advocate to protect the environment. So I was privileged to be at a talk that he gave recently at Treehouse, and he shared another body of work he had just recently discovered of going to Montgomery and being in one of the marches, the freedom marches there. So we're talking about full circle. He's come full circle, and he began in the '60s photographing, and now he's photographing social movements again. So it's really exciting. All right, so a little bit more background. Wayne's got his BFA from the San Francisco Art Institute. He did his MFA at Pratt Institute in New York. He's published over 5 books, and he's been in other publications with many other photographers as well. And we're talking about like Aperture, American Photographer, Camera Arts, Lens Work. I mean, the list goes on. He's had fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Ohio Arts Council, the Hawaii State Foundation on Culture and the Arts. I mean, see, this is amazing, right? Amazing man. He's widely exhibited, and we're talking not just locally. Locally, he's at Honolulu Museum of Art, Hawaii State of Art Museum, Bishop Museum, First Hawaiian Bank, and even Banana Republic. So next time you're shopping, not that many of us go anymore, at Ala Moana, look in Banana Republic for some of his work on the walls there. And he's at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. He's in the Museum of Photography Art. He's in the Maritime Museum, National Academy of Sciences, Newport News, the Maritime Museum. He's also in the Dimbola Museum in the UK and in the Data Museum in South Korea. So his work is renowned not just locally. So aside from his impressive credentials, most of all, I think Wayne is just a very kind and humble individual who inspires everyone who knows him. He recently underwent his successful surgery for cataracts, and we're looking forward to what he has in 20/20 vision, right? 20/20, 20/20. I did just want to read a brief quote from an interview with Tara Cronin in Lens Scratch because I feel like this ties in his new work with his old work. So Wayne asked the question about oculi. He says, are the individual oculi like cells of a larger entity? And when you ask that, the question that follows is, are we entities unto ourselves, or are we just a part of a larger being, humanity? And is humanity just a part of a larger being, the living earth? So could all of life on earth be like the cells that make up the larger entity, the earth? If so, an individual that acts like they are not connected to the larger whole and is a single being unto itself is much like a cancer cell. Could the earth be suffering from a malignancy of its humanity? And I mean, this is an old interview, I think 4 years old, and it just like hit me really hard. So the last thing I want to say is I really want to thank Wayne for being with us tonight, especially because it's his 75th birthday today. So I think we should all just sing him a little happy birthday or give him a clap, and maybe at the end of the presentation. So happy birthday, Wayne. Thank you so much for being with us. We can't wait to hear about your new series, Where Border Crosses.
Okay. First I have to show you my t-shirt I'm wearing. I have to show it off. Wait. Can you see? Today is the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, which hasn't gotten a lot of, usually the anniversaries of the United Nations are in the news, but there's been so much crazy stuff going on. It hasn't been on. I was born the same day and the same year as the United Nations. So maybe that explains it. I don't know what it explains, but maybe it explains something. First of all, I wanted to give my mahalos. First of all, to Hawkins and the Hawaii Trail and Mountain Club, and also for Matt Mullums and the Hawaii Photo Night for making this event possible. I'd also like to thank Chris Castiglitis, and my daughter, Elise Levin, who created a beautiful soundtrack for the slideshow. And Mike Liedman, who was my traveling companion on my trip to Mexico. We spent a good evening discussing what we were experiencing and seeing over great Mexican food and plenty cerveza and a little mezcal on top of that. So that was good. I'll talk, and last but not least, I want to thank my wife, Mary, for taking good care of me when I came back in mid-March and went into quarantine for 2 weeks. And she cooked my meals, and that was when I was editing and sequencing this work. I'll say a little bit about the concept of this work, but the concept is really pretty simple. It's in the title, Where Borders Cross. And I wanted to create a series of photography about the crossing point between the border, the natural border between the American continent and the Pacific Ocean, and the man-made border between Mexico and the US. So that was the concept. There was a lot that went into it, and I was thinking about going through the whole thing, but it would have added another 20 minutes plus to this introduction. So I'm just going to mention a few things that really solidified my idea. And one was I saw this movie called Hecho en Mexico, which translates to Made in Mexico. And it was a musical documentary, or it is a musical documentary that came out in 2014. So it's probably filmed in 2012 and 2013, but it focused on the music of Mexico and showing what Mexico was like at that time. And it had chapters in it. And one of the chapters was called La Frontera, which means the border. So they showed the border at the place where the border wall, which at that time was more of a rickety fence, where it went into the ocean. And I was kind of amazed. It probably went a good 75 yards into the ocean. And I was, I'd never heard of that. I never heard of the concept of dividing the ocean, except Moses. So hadn't heard of that since Moses's time. But I thought, well, that's really interesting. And there was also very interesting artwork on that fence. There were a lot of wooden crosses, hundreds of them actually, but that fence was torn down when they built the new wall. The other thing that really kind of focused things was I saw an interview with a Mexican singer-songwriter named Mila Downs, and they asked her at the end of the interview, what if Trump builds this wall? And she thought about it for a minute, and then she said, well, it'll be a place for art and a place where people can get together and show that they have love for each other. And I really, that really affected me. And I started, I see the wall as, it's a physical thing, but maybe not that effective as a physical thing, but it's also a psychological thing, and that it's possible to totally change the meaning and the idea of the psychology of the wall. So that was something that really affected me, and I really wanted to maybe communicate in my work. Let me just see. Oh yeah, and the last thing was, through a lifetime of photography, I actually never have believed that photography or art could change human destiny. But now in my old age, I not only believe it, but I believe it's one of the strongest tools we have. So I'll go into the pictures now. I'm seeing some yellow marks, but I hope you guys don't see them. So I decided when I edited it and sequenced it, I wanted to start with that first border, that border between the land and sea. And what I consider that like a really real natural border between two different worlds. I've spent enough time on both land and sea to know how different they are. It's almost like the physics are different. The way light works is differently, the way weight works. So being in the, in the ocean and being in land, I really see those as just different worlds. So I was interested in just photographing that edge, but it's a dynamic border because, waves come in and out, tides come in and out. So it's always in motion, unlike borders between countries and states and stuff, which are static. But my earliest work of the ocean, I titled The Sea's Edge, because that's what I was into, photographing that edge. So now, all these years later, I'm kind of working back. There's a couple of themes that I worked with a long time ago that came back in this series. Another thing, like I say, the trip to Mexico was pretty short. It was like a week and only 4 real days of photography. And when I came back, I got back the day before the quarantine went into effect. It was like mid-March, the day before the Hawaii quarantine went into effect. But my wife put me in quarantine anyway, which was probably a good idea. So I had 2 weeks living in this Ohana room with these photographs, and in 4 days I managed to take about 2,500 pictures. So I had a great time being served my meals and editing and trying to sequence this work and thinking about how I could put it together. And part of it, I kind of imagine somebody looking at this as a slideshow or something and thinking like, where is this going? Like, okay, maybe they're nice pictures of the ocean and land, and are we going to be looking at these all night or what? So I kind of wanted to create that. I don't know if that's really created. People probably have a better idea where it's going, but anyway. Then when you hit this picture, it's like, first of all, I don't know if you would necessarily know that that's a border between two countries, you know, that those posts in the sand really represents a borderline between, you know, two different cultures and two countries, and maybe to some degree a hostile border. You know, another thing is that, you know, I spent months, what happened after I saw those programs I was talking about, I went to Google Maps and they had hundreds of pictures of the border wall. And I spent months going through these pictures and trying to decide how I would photograph it that would be different, you know, looking at those and how I would approach it. I usually, when I have a photo assignment, I might have some preconceptions of what I'm going to do, and they almost never come true. But in this case, like I really preconceived this picture and the picture before it, and not looking at a picture like this, but looking at a picture from a much further distance away and going, I could really go into that point where that crossing of those two borders, you know, really, you know, go right into where it's happening. So the only thing is when I preconceived it, my conception was photographing it from the US side, because I guess the pictures I was looking at were mostly taken from the US side. And I hoped to photograph the US side, but it turned out I wasn't able to, and I'll talk more about that. But you know, here you can actually see how vast that wall is and how far it extends into the ocean. And the bird is like to be a symbol of freedom, maybe. And I loved the town of Playas de Tijuana, which is the town at the border on the Mexican side. It was a real kind of working class people's beach town. And, you know, it was a family town where, you know, families would come to be on the beach, be in the ocean, have a good time. It wasn't like Acapulco or Mazatlan or something, or anyway, it wasn't like the really expensive high class Mexican resort towns where only the rich people go. This was really a working class town. And I only saw a few Americans when I was there, but that may have been partly because the lockdown was already beginning to hit, and it hit in America maybe a week before Mexico. And this mural, are you guys seeing full screen? I'm getting cut up, but that's okay.
Yes,
Anyway,
it looks great, Wayne.
Okay, great. So this mural is an interactive mural that was created by an amazing young lady named Lisbeth Dela Cruz Santana. And each picture, each portrait on the mural has a barcode. And if you take a picture of the barcode, it'll play a video about the story of each of these people. And each of these people had good lives in America, and either they ended up being deported under the present administration, or their families were deported and their lives were kind of torn apart. So these videos are really interesting, and I have a series of links at the bottom of the page on the Hawaii Trail and Mountain Club site, and this is one of the links to her page, and you could watch those videos. You have to scroll all the way down. There's a picture of the wall, the mural with barcodes, and that may work with an iPhone, but if you just want to scroll further down, there's black and white portraits, and you could click on that and it'll play the videos. And a couple of surveillance helicopters looking for illegals coming across the border. And this guy, I assume it's his daughter he's holding, but he took her out, waded into the ocean to show her each of those murals. And I assume it's a father and a son playing in the sand. And then we go further up the hill into the wall. And okay, getting back to photographing on the American side, my plan was we flew into San Diego on a Friday and to spend the Saturday photographing the American side, but it was closed because of flooding. So we changed our plans and came over the border Saturday morning, checked into our hotel and walked over to the wall, and there were all these people painting on the wall. And it was kind of an incredible experience. And after that, it never happened again. And then by the time we left, like 5 days later, Playa de Tijuana was beginning to shut down. So the fact that I couldn't photograph on the American side was maybe a blessing in disguise, because it gave me a lot of other opportunities. So the woman on the right name is Carla, and she befriended me and was really nice and talked about what she was doing and what the wall meant to her. And the other girl next to her, her name was Kania. And one of the things I thought about in photographing the walls is in America, how much dehumanization there is of the people from Latin America, especially by politicians and some people that follow them. And I wondered what it felt like and what it felt like to basically have a wall shoved in your face, and that symbolism. And Kania has a hat that says humano, which means human, which I think is a real direct, strong statement. And Carla's t-shirt, some of you may know what that means. I didn't know what it meant, and I didn't think about it too much, but I saw the word MAGA, but I talked enough to Carla to know that she was no fan of MAGA. So I didn't think about it, but then a few days ago, I decided to do a Google search on Commando Krav MAGA. It turns out to be Commando Krav Maga, but I don't know if you guys know what it means. I was thinking maybe it's a music group or something, but what it is a form of hand fighting developed by the Israeli military, and it's considered the deadliest form of hand fighting in the world. So good thing me and Carla got along well. And I forget this guy's name, but he was the first person I met actually. So people were really friendly, and they, I had my camera and they wondered where I was from and, why I was photographing the wall and what they were telling me what they were doing. I remember he was from La Paz. He came up with his friend to paint on the wall from La Paz. And this was his friend taking a selfie in front of the wall. And another couple who just, were very friendly, and they wanted me to take a photograph of them. And whenever I photographed anybody, I would give them my card. Well, when I took a photograph a portrait where they knew I was photographing, some of the pictures are more like street photography. So I would give them a card and tell them, email me and I'll send you prints. And they all took the card and they all said they were going to email me, but nobody has so far. Just to prove it, there's Carla holding my card. But if you look at her sleeve, it says instructora, which means she not only does Commando Krav Maga, but she's an instructor at it. And if it was a man's shirt, it would be instructoro. So this is a female instructor. That's what it means. I really got into actually zooming into the pictures and reading everything that was written on the wall. And I'm not going to go through everything, you know, I'll say a few. But like behind them is Viva Sin Muro, Sin, I gotta read it, Sin Bari Ras, which means live without walls, without barriers. And I like the colors in this one. And you see the person on the far right painting with a white hat on. Carla introduced me to her, and she was a refugee from Honduras. And actually, Carla said, tell him what you're gonna write on the wall. And she started to talk and then just burst out crying. And she never got it out what she was writing. But Carla told me that she was separated from her family. Her family did get into America, but she didn't know if they were in a detention camp or if they were okay. She hadn't been able to contact them, and she wasn't able to get in. And I was going to say that, you know, I never knew what she wrote on the wall, but like just yesterday, I went back through the pictures and I found this, which the translation is a little bit difficult. It doesn't really translate too smoothly to English, but it's what it is suena, actually it's sueña, alto is sound loud or sound high. And then Haas, let's see, I can't see the whole thing. I forget exactly what was said, but what it translates to is sound loud, make your dreams come true. And to me, I'm thinking that sound loud may not necessarily mean make a lot of noise. It may mean, you know, like really stand up for what you believe or stand up for yourself. It's the only way to make what you want to come true. Anyway, that's how a lot of people, lots of people obviously like to look through the spaces in between the bars and the wall to look at the other side. So I just, I photographed a lot of people looking through those walls, looking at America, just because they were curious. On this one, above the woman in the purple jacket, it says El Arte Nos Une. It means art unites us. And, I go through all these little tiny, in my pictures, tiny things written. And, if I couldn't figure out what they said with my limited Spanish, I go to the Google Translator. And I never noticed the big letters, those big black block letters on the right, which says justicia, which means justice. And more pictures of people looking through the wall. And, people would play on the wall. They'd climb up. Actually, Trump said that with this Great Wall, nobody would be able to climb it. And actually one of the caravans in 2018 that were coming up through Central America ended up at Playa de Tijuana, and there's video of, like 15 people climbing to the top of the wall and then sitting on top of it. Women too. But then after that, they put these coils of barbed wire, or what they call concertina wire, because it's in coils, and you could, like a accordion, like a little accordion, you could expand and contract it. And people taking selfies at the wall and having fun with it. Above them it says Amor Paz en el mundo. It means love, peace, and the world. If any of you speak Spanish, forgive my poor pronunciation. Now, these two people, there was actually a meeting, a get together sponsored by this group called Unified US Deported Veterans. And so I photographed these two people, members of that group, and they were obviously deported US veterans. And I posted it on my Instagram, and Liz Santana, the woman who did that interactive mural, said, "Oh, Hector and Lupita, they're wonderful people." So I got back to Liz and said, because she goes to the border quite often. And I said, if I make prints and send them to you, would you be willing to deliver it to them? And she said, yeah. So I sent her prints, a couple prints for them. So I did get a few prints out to people. This is the celebration. There was a communion too. I'll talk more about that organization later. So this is my little music section. I decided to do a Mexican music section. And this is actually not at the wall. It's there's a boardwalk that extends south from the wall, running right above the beach. And there's wonderful murals on the boardwalk, and I took a few pictures of those. And I made a rule for myself. When I photograph, I find that if I do a project, sometimes making like these rules or limitations gives me more freedom. Like with my black and white underwater work, I made the rule it had to be black and white and it had to be underwater. But given those restrictions, I could photograph anything, shipwrecks or surfers or whales or canoe paddlers. So I found that and that restriction would kind of still hold it together. But in this case, my restriction was if you put a pin or a point right where that border between the ocean and the land meets the border between US and Mexico, that all the pictures had to be within a half-mile radius of that. So it ended up, I only used like 1/4 of the pie. I was thinking of doing underwater work of the wall, but it turned out, to bring all my underwater equipment and diving equipment, I decided it would just complicate it. Maybe another trip I could do it. And then I also wanted to photograph on the US side, but I couldn't do that. So I was only able to photograph the Mexican land quarter of the wall. But I like this mural because it seemed to me like that woman on the mural seemed more real than the quote real man above smoking a cigarette. And this one I didn't put in my slideshow, and I was really kicking myself because it kind of really sums up a lot. I really love that painting, and it's about humanity, which I think is what you know, the art, most of the artwork on the wall is about. This is they're growing plants in some cubicles. So he's a gardener. Okay, and this is the binational garden. So they had this garden of plants from that, native plants to that area. And it was on both sides of the wall, the Mexican side and the American side. And it was a symbol of unification, and you know, people were able to come together and work on the Mexican side or work on the American side. And like a year ago, they bulldozed the American side. So somebody made a mural of the American side that had been bulldozed, but the Mexican side was still up. And this was a group of boxers. They would be there, you know, working out every day in that area. And the guy in the blue jacket showed me on his iPhone, played me some of their boxing matches, and they were pretty hardcore. I mean, they weren't sparring. It was really intense boxing matches that he showed me. And, you know, just people taking selfies, a family looking at a selfie they just took at the wall, taking portraits at the wall. There were lots of these hearts, you know, beautifully painted. And, you know, especially along the boardwalk. And I took pictures of a lot of them, but this is the only one I used in the slideshow. But more people taking selfies. And the pictures of people on the lampposts were missing people. You know, and there is a lot of violence, the cartels and everything in that area. So there were these big portraits that were adhered to the wall, and they were like sliced because the wall is in bars. They sliced them and then pasted them in sections onto the wall, and then over time they're peeling off. And I thought maybe they were missing people too, but I didn't know for sure. And then a friend of mine, a really good artist in Hilo named Bob Douglas, told me, oh, look at the corner of the pictures. They've written something and maybe you could figure out more about it. So I zoomed into it and it said the Inside Out Project. So I Googled the Inside Out Project, and it's like this worldwide portrait project where people have portraits taken of them to make a statement, and it's all over the world. And I've also put the link to their website on the links that I have. So you might want to take a look. There's places where they've covered buildings with portraits. You know, I think the meanings of the portraits vary depending on, you know, what the issues are and where they're from. But I emailed the Inside Out Project and got in touch with a lady there and sent them these pictures. And I told her that I thought these pictures were really haunting. And I asked her for information about if they had any information about that project. And you know, she agreed that they were haunting and sent me pictures of an action they did in Plaza de Tijuana, but it was portraits on boards that were adhered to the wall, to the posts. And it was in a different section of the wall I could see. So I went, you know, that's not the same one. And she said, well, we did 4 actions there, so I'm not sure. I can't really be sure which one it is. But I was glad to know that these weren't missing people. These were people using their portrait to make a statement. They also told me, this was like in March, and they said they'd like me to do, you know, photography for an action in Hawaii. They said, but we could do it as soon as the pandemic comes to an end. You know, we thought maybe that would be a month away or something. But this is, again, one of those lampposts. So this is, again, missing people. and a mural behind them with a hand holding a $500 bill. And then getting back to the deported veterans, it's a huge issue there, you know, and it made some news in the US, but it was much more important there. But basically, you know, like I was in the Navy and I remember there being Filipinos and Romanians and people from Latin America who were serving, you know, 20-year, you know, times in the military. And the understanding was that when they got out, they'd be able to stay to live in the US and they'd have a pathway to US citizenship. But when Trump came in office, these people were deported. And not only that, they had all the benefits of, you know, what they call a lifer, 20 years in the military, you know, great health insurance, you know, all kinds of other VA benefits, and they lost them all. And I have their link, the link to their website, Unified US Deported Veterans is also there. And there's a video on the link, which is really powerful. And I like to, you know, this, the 3 countries that were represented in the caravan were Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. And then the bird kind of represents freedom. It can, you know, to it, the wall doesn't mean much except for maybe a place to perch. You know, it can fly either side, it doesn't matter. And you know, there would be people would be constantly adding new things to the wall, and they'd be painting over what somebody had before. And like here, you could see somebody put all these hearts on the wall, and they almost covered up welcome refugees. And this picture of the little girl with the shadowy figure, I kind of went through 3 interpretations in my own mind of what it might symbolize. At first I thought, oh, it's a nice picture of this girl with her parent. And then I thought, no, you know, it's this shadow figure. I don't think as a parent, I think she's being led into one of the detention camps. But after reading some of what's written next to it, I now think, and I'm not sure, but I now interpret it as being a girl, this child with her parent, but the parent has turned into a shadow, like the parent's not there anymore. And it's separation. And, you know, some of what's, you know, written on the wall, you could see mothers and daughters, and same heart, mismo latido means same heartbeat. Partly covered up, you could see the family. So there's, you know, right there's a lot of stuff about the family separation. And I guess you all heard about the 545 children they can't find their parents. And, you know, I don't think many, you know, much of the work on the wall is pretty much about humanity and unity and love and, you know, maybe a little bit of anger too, but maybe this is the only one that seems to me to really be striking an anti-America or anti-what America stands for tone. And here on the top, it says Miro de la Humanidad, no, Hermandad, I'm sorry. And Hermandad means brotherhood, but it can also mean sisterhood. And the fact that it uses the feminine for the, la, instead of el, so it could be, if it was Miro del Hermandad, it would be Muro of the Brotherhood. But Muro de la Hermandad, I think it's saying Muro of the Sisterhood. That's interesting to me. You can see, freedom, peace, love, amor, paz, libertad. And un mundo sin muros means a world without walls. That's written a lot there. In yellow, esperanza means hope. I'm trying to show off my Espanol, but it's really muy poco, poquito, very little. I trying to learn more. But this this is the gate you see is a gateway to Friendship Park. And there's a, on the American side, 50 yards basically to the north of the border wall, there's a secondary fence, very tall fence. And the area, that secure area in between the fence and the wall, is Friendship Park. And it used to be, actually, Pat Nixon opened Friendship Park back in the 70s, and there'd be certain days when families that were separated could come together from the US side and the Mexican side, and they could come together and spend, several hours together talking and having a picnic or whatever. But that gate's been closed since 2017. Todos somos migrantes is we are all migrants. And I think that's true. Humans are basically in motion, and we all come from somewhere. Even indigenous people, if you go back far enough, have come from somewhere else. So we all have come from somewhere else. And I also posted a link on the links. There's a link to a song by an Uruguayan singer, a really great singer named George Drexler. And it's called Movimento. And it's about this issue exactly. It's about migrants, about migration, about human migration. And the chorus of it is, I'm not from here, but neither are you. And actually, I really, in a way, visually, I loved the way the wall was constructed. I know that Trump originally wanted to have solid walls, and he had all these, test walls made by different companies of solid walls, but the Border Patrol wanted to see what was going on the other side, so they made these walls like this. And most of the walls that I've seen are this design, exactly this design. And I like it visually because, before even being an underwater photographer, I was a street photographer in New York and San Francisco and Honolulu. And I always like to have pictures within pictures. I like to look at, have pictures that maybe would have a billboard in it, or another picture in it, or a window display with mannequins, and then the reflections of what's happening on the street on the outside. Now, this was another term I kind of brought back from the old days, which I like to create a tension between conflicting realities. And, to me, that in a way, that's what's happening here, going back and forth between, what's happening on the wall, and you could see the secondary fence through it. And you see it's a really beautiful beach on the US side and pretty deserted compared to the Mexican side. So I took a number of pictures with that. That was a major thing in photographing that wall, being able to see through it and see what's happening on the other side. I like this one. It's like a bridge over the border, but it stops halfway. The Border Patrol vehicle on the other side. That's a real palm tree on the Mexican side of the wall. You can see the fence, the secondary fence. And actually that swamp, it's actually a nature preserve on the, behind the beach, there's a swamp, and that's why there really was flooding. You know, and there was a hard rain one night when we were there, and that swamp was totally flooded. So, you know, it was true. They weren't just trying to keep me from photographing the US side. It was true that there was flooding. And, you know, the crying woman with the babies reflected in her eye. I think the one on the right looks more like a bird, maybe an owl to me. But anyway, that's what I see out of. Here's the ultimate migrant between the US and Mexico, the monarch butterfly. You'll notice, you know, how rusty the wall is and how much corrosion. This was built in 2017. And, you know, it's cheap grade steel they used. I guess if you're basically a grifter, you like other grifters and you hire people who use, you know, cheap materials. The other thing about, oh, I'll go back. The other thing about the wall, this construction is that smugglers are able to, with a sawzall, with a reticulating saw, in a matter of a few minutes, they could cut through like 3 or 4 of those bars on top and 3 or 4 of them on the bottom, and have a big, you know, like 4-foot square hole to smuggle things through. So that's what was happening. That's why now there's these metal, like steel, I don't know, big pieces of steel that's welded onto the US side of the wall, because there was a lot of smuggling through it. We are sanctuary. And again, the bird with the concertina wire. The birds are laughing. Bring peace, pauses, peace, pause, peace. And I thought this was a very interesting, you know, so I went into this picture. It's the only one I actually cropped into it to see what was written. And on top, I can't quite follow it. It's like, we're not going to maybe share or shame. I don't know, it's SHA something. It could be we're not going to share something. But below it says, we're going to share who we really are, which again speaks to that reacting positively to that dehumanization. And then on the left along that mural, it says, for us, the spirits of our ancestors and the people that had, and then a ... But, you know, it reminds me of the philosophy of people in the Hawaiian movement, you know, that they revere their ancestors. And of course, in Mexico, with El Dia de Muerte, it's a really important part of their culture. And this part, I did since I couldn't photograph the American side, I kind of went into it. And this is actually still a legal picture. I don't know if I forgot if I mentioned that I took one picture that broke my rules that I really liked. So there's one picture I'll show you that was actually taken outside of that half-mile radius, but it's not this one. So there's all these murals on the wall as it goes up this hill, and then it goes down into a ravine. And I think there were migrants, you know, from Central America living in the ravine. But anyway, that's easily within a half-mile of that point. So it's a legal picture. But you can see there's like a huge wall on the American side, you know, at least looks like 100 yards inside, which goes and then it stops. And I don't know if they're planning to continue that or not. And a garden of barbed wire. At least that's the way it struck me, although it's not really barbed wire. and high definition, remote controlled video cameras for spotting illegals coming over the border. And it's on a very high tower. This picture speaks for itself. Okay, this is the picture I cheated on. It was taken at the border crossing, the San Ysidro Tijuana border crossing. And I just, I really like the picture. It says a lot for me. And that's the actual wall that you could see through there. And I guess it's some kind of holding area in there that's locked off, but not sure what it is. But it's about 10 miles from Playa de Tijuana. So I used it. And it's also the only picture of the wall I took where I'm actually looking north. I mean, I'm sorry, where I'm actually looking south. All the other ones I'm looking north. So these pictures are taken through the spaces in the wall, of the secondary fence. And the night picture, you can see how illuminated it is, how illuminated Friendship Park is. And there's this organization, Friends of Friendship Park, and I have the link to their website here too. And they want to create a big, beautiful park on both sides of the border. And they have already made plans on it. So maybe it'll be possible one of these days, depending on what happens. And now this wire isn't really, I know barbed wire. This isn't barbed wire. This is called razor wire, and it's a lot more lethal than barbed wire. And here's a close-up of it. But with all those pictures of hearts on the wall, when I see this, I kind of see like it looks like the top of a heart to me. So I got into the last few hours I photographed the wall. I got into doing close-ups of some of the things on the wall. And some of the hearts. Mundo Migrante means world migrant. That we could read. And there were a lot of hands. People, to me, that was like a symbol of humanity. And there were hands, people would draw hands or leave their handprints on the wall. So there's a number of these photographs showing that. And tear down the wall. Actually, I don't really believe in tearing down the wall. I'm in favor of leaving it up and creating every inch of it covering with beautiful artwork about humanity and about human migration on both sides. So that's what I'd really like to see, is transform the meaning of the wall. And then if you have to make more gates through it, or, when it comes to animal migrations, maybe you could use sensing. But still a very small portion of the wall, of the border, is actually walled. I watched a show which was saying the philosophy is to put walls on the easy places to get through and force migrants to come through in the very dangerous, like this Sonora Desert, the very dangerous uninhabitable places where they think thousands of people have perished. Amando a un eterno viajero means loving to an eternal voyager or eternal traveler. This is about humanity, kind of says it all for me. And a close-up of that girl. And just some shapes. And that wire again on top of the wall. This is like a twilight shot. And you could see that the searchlight on the American side is about 10 times brighter than the lighthouse on the Mexican side. And fishermen by the wall. And close to sunset. What this says, like word for word, is that our words are bridges, not walls. But the meaning kind of changes, sometimes a lot and sometimes a little bit when you put the words together. So the meaning really is, may our words be bridges, not walls. And then this is the bridge across the wall. And that's it. So, and I can take questions now if there's any.
Okay, I'm just asking our Zoom
Yeah,
host to allow people to unmute if they have questions. That's amazing. Thank you, Wayne. So I did want to mention Wayne discussed having a bunch of links. So I'm just gonna share.
Anyone can unmute. Anyone with questions is able to unmute themselves.
Wayne, I just want to thank you so much. Remarkable. It was really like being in an art museum with a social conscience. I'm wondering, I know you didn't get to the American side, but did the American side have this kind of expression on it at all?
You got it. Wayne's muted. Wayne, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay. Yeah, I looked at lots of pictures of the American side and I really wanted to photograph that side. Kind of my preconception before photographing was that both sides were an amazing work of art. And the Mexican side was an amazing work of art about humanity. And the American side was an amazing and very expressive work of art about fear. But I actually haven't been there to photograph it, so maybe I'd have a different feeling if I actually was there. But there's lots of warning signs. It's full of barbed wire and fences and warning signs. And I really wanted to approach that in a similar way that I approached the Mexican side and just see where it led me. So when I could safely travel again, or relatively safely, I want to go back. I really love Playas de Tijuana, so I really want to go back there and also get to the American side. And I've looked at my work and I'm going, oh, there's other things other ways I could have photographed it that I didn't think of at the time. So I'd like to get back. Okay, do I mute myself now? I'm like really dense on this.
No, you can stay unmuted, and then if someone asks you a question, you can just answer.
Okay, great.
I have a question. Wayne, thank you so much. I'm wondering if there are other borders that you would like to photograph, and what drew you to this project initially?
What's the last thing you said?
What drew you to this project initially, and are there other borders that you would like to photograph?
Probably right now I'm good with just this border. I'd like to maybe do more on this border and maybe other places on this border. So I'm not, and other people have suggested that to me too. And I know there's, walls on other borders, and some people have done amazing artwork on them. But I would like to do this more artwork on this wall. And you were saying, what do I think was tragic about this? Is that what you said? Is that what you asked?
Oh, I think she wanted to know what inspired you to choose this.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay,
right.
so kind of the longer story, which I was thinking of saying in my introduction, but I didn't. It all started, I guess, I was pretty upset when Trump was elected 4 years ago. And so I decided to join a resist Trump group. And I decided to, because I knew Gay Chan, who had a group called J20 Plus. So I decided to join that group. And Gay asked me, when I was talking to her about possibly joining, she asked me what I thought was the biggest issue, confronting us. And I said, the environment and climate change. And I still think that's the biggest issue, but it's all become, I see it all as one issue. The human rights, which this is related to, climate change, all the issues, Black Lives Matter, all these issues I see as totally connected. So anyway, I joined this group, and the group really was, focusing on all kinds of issues. But then as time went on, it seemed like J20's main focus was immigration and the border. And and they had several really good seminars on it. They were working to have Honolulu made into a sanctuary city. So that kind of made me much more aware of that. It made me much more focused. So I was kind of right. But then there's another side to it. I can be very inspired by visual arts. I'm a visual artist. But my main inspiration has always been music, and I'm not a musician at all. I'm just a music lover. So through my life, I've really gotten into all different forms of music. Like when I was really young, I was into Broadway musicals of all things. And then in the 60s, I got into rock, and then into jazz and blues, and then into classical music, and then specifically opera. And then the latest thing is, and that's another long story, but how that happened, but I ended up getting really into not all, but some Latin American music. And when you get into anything, music or art to that degree, it's not only the music, but you read about it and you learn about the culture it came out of and the history it came out of. So that really sensitized me to Latin America. It gave me a lot of empathy for that. And when I saw what was happening to people immigrating because their governments were corrupt and they couldn't live safely in their country and wanted to come to America and being turned away, and then worse, having the nightmare of families being separated, of children being torn away from their parents and basically thrown into, they say cages, thrown into cells, whatever, overcrowded. As I'm Jewish, and as a child, I was really made aware of the Holocaust. So through my whole life, I was aware of the Holocaust. And I always wondered, what would I do if I was a German citizen then? Would I have done anything, And there's a little bit of this that reminds me a little bit of what's happening, maybe not to the degree, but it's not that far into it. Like we're talking like, we're like Germany in 1936 or something, you know, so it's a little bit of this reminds me of that. And I feel like I have to take a stand.
Well, thank you
So,
for sharing
and
that.
Wait, well, I have another question. I found the wall so expressive and actually beautiful, and with all the hearts, and in many ways it was much more positive and almost optimistic, and there was a joy, a happiness in it. um, and I was wondering, did you have that sense? Did those feelings, were those your feelings when you were actually there and witnessing it, or was it just what I took from the photo, from the art that was being expressed?
no, I totally saw that, you know, that like I said, I left that town. There was a lot of happiness. Everybody was friendly. I had absolutely zero negative experiences. You know, nobody called me gringo or, you know, people, you know, people were just all friendly and open, and the food was great. You know, the restaurants all had blaring like mariachi music and great food. And yeah, there was a lot of music there. There was music on the beach. So it was there at, you know, I don't know what it's like now, but I imagine it's still pretty shut down. So I got there really at the last minute, but it, you know, it seemed like people were really enjoying themselves, and they, you know, the people obviously see the wall as an insult, but they want to show that they, for the most part, that they have love, you know, that their reaction is, you know, brotherhood. You know, there were, you know, except for maybe the upside down American flag with the upside down crosses, there was nothing that I saw as anti-American, but definitely questioning the policies, you know, questioning separation and you know, probably the most common thing written on the wall was Un Mundo. You know, I'm having brain freeze, but a world without walls.
I just want to say thank you, Wayne, for doing this. I really enjoyed it.
Oh,
So
hi, Matt. Thank you.
good to see you.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, my man.
Oh, thank you.
And great job, Hawkins. I was enjoy you putting this together, and that was a great introduction.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
he's an
Thank
intimidating
you.
man to introduce, I tell you. Yeah, it's been amazing having these images, and they're so different from your other body of work, but I do feel like it's about the planet, and it's about humanity, and it's about all being together, and your feeling for the ocean and trying to preserve it. It's the same, you know, it's just you're turning your camera now to people. I was just wondering if it's hard to go from black and white to color.
Well, I wanted to use color because the wall was so colorful. You know, I thought about black and white. You know, a lot of times I've shot in color and switched it to black and white so that it unifies with my other work. But this I just wanted to keep in color. I'm probably, I would consider myself a better black and white photographer than color. But it was fun doing color. You know, I knew how to work in Photoshop well enough. Well, what happened is I kind of overcompensated because I had these cataracts coming on, and I wasn't too aware of it at first. I'm going, boy, these pictures look like their color looks really faded and they look flat. So I added, you know, I added more color to it and a little more contrast. And then when my eyes were fixed, I'm going, wow, these are really pretty zappy color and pretty contrasty. And I usually prefer like subtler palette of color. But I didn't change this, maybe I'll go back and change it to the way I prefer, but I kind of overcompensated because of the cataracts. It was interesting. But it's great to be able to see again. I mean, I was really like half blind. It was really crazy. It was really bad cataracts. And I believe in science. So, and there was something I was going to respond to that you had said, but I forgot what it was.
I really enjoyed the saturation actually for the color. And I think because of the subject matter and the feeling of happiness and unity and humanity, it kind of speaks to that, the brightness of it.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Different than you would have done, but I think it worked well with your message. Do you have any future visits? I mean, it's really hard with COVID now, but were you planning to go back annually or? No?
Yeah, I want to go, I wanted to make a big trip to the mainland, and I want to do it when this is over. I go to a few places, but I wanted to go back to the border and photograph on both sides. And then, I did this work on fish schools and the coolie schools and asking, which thank you for mentioning that, because I really agree that it ties into this work, conceptually. And, so I photographed these schools and then bird flocks, and it came to experiencing that made me question, like, what's the individual? Is it the individual fish, or is it like you said, are they cells in a larger being? So I heard about this in Utah, a aspen grove, and they said it's the largest living being on Earth. That the whole grove is, from one root system, and that was one being. So I wanted to go to Utah to photograph that, and I have a nephew that lives in Utah. I could visit him, and then, but then I found out that wasn't true. That's not the largest being on Earth. It's a mushroom grove in Oregon, apparently. So I want to go photograph this mushroom grove. My sister lives in Oregon, so I was thinking of taking a trip and going to the border and then going to Utah to photograph the aspen grove and go to Oregon and photograph. I don't know. I think they told me most of the mushroom stuff is underground, but go there and see what I could photograph on it. And but the idea of this massive, several square mile single being is really interesting. So I wanted to, so that's the trip that I'm planning when I can do it safely. But I am 75 and I have type A positive blood, which they say is worse, it's like a bad blood for COVID. So I want to be careful. But I wasn't careful when I went to Mexico. It's like, it was mid-March and it was really getting on the radar, and I had really planned this trip. And I remember my daughter saying, "Are you really going to go now?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm going." It was, I was taking her, it was risky probably going at that time. And like I said, I just hit it perfect to be, the last several days that Playas de Tijuana was still happening. And that by the time I left the last day, it was shutting down. And we took a trip 30 miles or so south to Rosarita Beach, which is a more touristy place. And that was already totally shutting down. And it was the time we went to this really good taco restaurant and talked to the owner, and he's saying, normally there'd be people around the block waiting to get in because this is the time of the American spring break, and all the college students come down. And we were the only people in the restaurant. And, so Mexico was really beginning to shut down too at that point. So.
Well, I know I mentioned this earlier, Wayne, but I'd love it. Logistically, it sounds difficult to bring your water gear, but I would love to see what you did with that at the border wall. I think that
underwater. Yeah, maybe next time I'll bring my. Yeah, so I have to, I would just snorkel, but I would want to probably bring my own fins and mask and snorkel and a couple underwater cameras, and then I have to deal with film. So hopefully, talking out of X-raying it at the border. So those were the issues I was thinking about that kind of made me decide not to do it. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what I don't think the water's super clear there. But it still may be pretty interesting with a high contrast film. And I wanted to also do a photograph above water of swimming out to the very end of the wall and photographing in, lining myself up right on the edge of the wall. And then I was thinking, well, would they arrest me or something or worse? And I was, when we were talking today, I said, I think it would be safer swimming from the American side. So they think maybe you're swimming into Mexico, than swimming from the Mexican side. So, and on the beach scenes, you saw those. What's that?
You make national news, Wayne, for photo.
Oh, yeah.
Back and forth.
Yeah. Crazy photographer arrested at best and thrown in detention for for trying to swim from US to Mexico. But anyway, oh yeah, I was going to say also, if I did that, did you see in the pictures of the beach, you could see those islands off the shore in those first pictures? And those are the Coronado Islands, and they're supposed to be excellent diving. I mean, and the Sea of Cortez is some of the best diving in the world, so, and I've never dove there, so maybe I do a diving trip there. After I do the land trip and photograph the aspens and the mushrooms. But and then south.
Healthy, Wayne. You better take care of yourself. You got a lot of work to do still.
I know, but yeah. I'll take it easy.
I did want to share the screen just to show everyone. So on the HTMC website, if you click past events after today, you'll find this announcement for Where Borders Cross. And at the bottom, here are all the links that Wayne talked about putting on here. So you've got all these links to the different things you've been researching about this project. And we're also going to put up a link to the video for tonight. So if you know anyone who wanted to see it and missed it, there'll be a link here on the website.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Did you want to play the video now or just have people go later onto it?
I think it's been an hour and a half. So I think if anyone wants to go, that's understandable. But I did right here, Where Borders Cross. This is a YouTube video that Wayne's daughter and her boyfriend put together. Do you want to talk about that a little bit briefly?
Okay. What the pictures that I showed today are a little bit different, and I added pictures, and I took out 4 pictures that I didn't think were strong that were in the video. So with time, I rethink which pictures should be in, like the picture of the young Mexican lady kissing the older woman for some crazy reason, I didn't put it in. You know, I could kick myself for not having that in the video, but my daughter, actually, Chris, my daughter's boyfriend, did the keyboard work and composed the music for it, and my daughter did the vocals. And, you know, I thought it really went well. You know, it set a mood for the slideshow. You know, so please watch it. It's 18 minutes, so it's not that long. Yeah, it's a little bit different from, and now that you have the background information on the pictures, you could get more out of the slideshow. Hi.
Okay, does anyone else have more questions for Wayne? If not, I think we should all sing happy birthday. Can we unmute at least and sing
Oh.
happy birthday?
Could you unmute everyone?
Everyone unmute.
Oh.
75th birthday, Wayne. That's pretty impressive. You're looking
Yeah.
fabulous. All right, 1, 2, 3. Happy
Happy
birthday
to you.
Happy birthday
to
you.
Happy birthday, dear Wayne.
Happy birthday to you.
Gracias. Buenas noches.
Muchas gracias.
De nada.
Ah. Hasta luego.
Hasta luego. Okay, I'm going to click out now.
All right.
See ya. Thank you. Gracias.
Thanks for joining us, Wayne, and giving us inspiration for hope for humanity in a world without walls.
Yes.
Don't forget to vote, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay.